Hello, everybody, and good morning from here from Calgary. Welcome to the second day of the 11th International Conference on the Built Environment 2021, hosted here in Canada at the University of Calgary by the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape. This year's conference special theme is Building the Anthropocene. As a fully online conference, this event is recorded. If you're not presenting or asking a question, we ask that you are muted to keep the proceedings smooth. And the recording will later be shared on the conference page for participants to revisit or watch the presentation in their own time. My name is Fabian Newhouse. I'm an associate professor at the University of Calgary. Together with David Montaigne, also an associate professor at the University of Calgary. We're the local host for the CG Research Network conference. I would like to introduce this morning's plenary speaker, Leroy Littlebear. He will speak for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we will have time for questions and answers. During that time, you can always put your questions into the chat, and then we'll revisit once Leroy has finished his presentation, and then we can revisit your questions and you can ask them. We'll call on the questions up one by one after the talk. Okay, so we'll get started with Leroy. Leroy Littlebear is Blackfoot. He grew up on the Blood Indian Reserve in southern Alberta. After studying at various institutions across North America, Leroy returned to Lethbridge as a professor and headed the Native American Studies program at the U of L. Leroy was also the founding director of the Interfaculty Native American program at Harvard University, where he taught briefly before returning to Lethbridge. Leroy's legal background and prominence in Indigenous advocacy has led to a series of important contributions to Canadian and international law. This work resulted in Leroy Littlebear becoming the first Indigenous person cited in Canada's Supreme Court. One of Leroy's most significant and enduring legacies is his work with the United Nations, where he helped to establish a working group on Indigenous populations. It was this working group that originated the concept and the initial draft of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. This declaration has since been ratified by 144 member states of the UN and is being implemented by the government of Alberta too. Leroy Littlebear's influence on Alberta, Canada, and the world continues. He is still teaching courses in law, native philosophy, and economic development at the University of Lethbridge and remains the senior advisor to the Office of the President on Aboriginal Initiatives. He's actively involved in the university's response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and continues to advocate for the return of the buffalo to southern Alberta. So please join me in welcoming Leroy Littlebear. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us and speaking to this conference.
Thank you very much, Fabian, for that wonderful introduction. Nistuan nakok ikas kinua. I naksiks kanau kisau kitappiua yanenuhtuutsitappi. I was introducing myself in Blackfoot. My Blackfoot name is Lowhorn. I'm of the Small Robes Band or clan, and I'm of Kaina, or known as the Blood Tribe, and we belong to the Blackfoot Confederacy. I am very honored to be part of your conference and especially to share thoughts with you about the Anthropocene, the notions about constructed environment. And I want to tell you that what I'll be speaking about will be from a Blackfoot perspective. It'll be how I see things from through the eyes of a Blackfoot. Okay. And this conference I take very seriously because it has great implications and ramifications for us humans, for us Homo sapiens here on this globe. And some of those, one of those ramifications we're dealing with today. All we have to do is say COVID, and everybody globally knows what's going on. See, it's affecting everybody throughout the world. And to a very large extent, it's being brought about by us, Homo sapiens. So let's see if we can share some of these thoughts that I have about constructed environment and us Homo sapiens and what we refer to as, a geological, time period, era, I forget the exact word, but the Anthropocene. That the origins of Homo sapiens is a matter of continuing debate, okay? All the way from the very first primates and so on, such as Homo antisaurus, almost 1,000,000 years ago, to literally human, about 120,000 years ago. And that is according to scientists who delve into these types of facts. And we can spend all day, a whole week, talking about those kind of facts and so on. But all of these scientists do agree on one thing, and that is that Homo sapiens came out of Africa. They pretty well all agree that that's the case. Let me just do a slight segue on that point. Today, on TV and all over the place, we're running into a lot of social problems, especially about racism. Well, we should remember that we owe our existence, if those scientists are correct, we owe our existence to those people that came out of Africa. Our existence came out of Africa, so we have to remember that. But it seems that to a very large extent, a large part of our problems are directed at those people that come from Africa. So, it's an important lesson to keep in mind. But somewhere in that mix and closer to our time period is Neanderthal man. one of our closest relatives. I always jokingly say, I used to text Neanderthal, but where is he now? He's gone. He's not around anymore. See? And modern human beings, as we know ourselves today, have been around about 100,000 years plus or minus. Now, Homo sapiens, and it's a matter of, like as we were saying, uh, I'm getting my, why, the point is, why is this important to know? Well, we are here to talk about the Anthropocene. And basically, the Anthropocene is really about the impact of humans on the world, on the globe. That's really what it's about. But to make my point, let me use the fish to illustrate what I want to bring across. You see, the fish is believed to have been around for a long time, 4 to 450 million years ago. But, however, and whenever it came upon the scene, the fish wandered over the spectrum of existence. You know, it wandered over that, you know, to the limit of its sentient capacities, and wandered back and forth over those millions of years. And it became a generalist in terms of a being. As a generalist, it developed a language so as to communicate different experiences arising out of that broad spectrum, and to communicate those different experiences between one fish and the other fish, say. And it adapted it to its environment physically and knowledge-wise, so that over time, the fish became more and more specialized to a particular environment. The specialization to a particular environment resulted in less and less need for language. A fish, when born, pretty well knows what it is to be a fish. In other words, that internalized knowledge a fish is born with, we Homo sapiens call instinct. And we kind of look down, on that notion of instinct. Yeah, that's the instinctual knowledge. But those little murmurs we hear between one fish and another is the remnants of their language. It is not the beginnings of a language. In other words, they all know the same thing. They do not have to talk about it. See, and those murmurs are just that little bit of difference to let them know that, hey, I'm not seeing myself in the mirror. Now, let's look at us, Homo sapiens. On a geological scale, we are brand new kids on the block. Just 100,000, 150,000 years old compared to the 400 million years of fish experience. Similar to the fish, we are roaming that sensory spectrum of existence to the limits of our sensory equipment, what it will allow us to do. So, as new kids on the block, we are very much generalists, jack of all trades, but masters of none. So, many scientists limit the Anthropocene to the 1940s, to the present. But in my view, it goes much further back. See, because talking about that fish experience and how we are similar, we are going through the stage now where we start out very much as generalists, but are going more towards specialization. See, okay. Now, talking about this Anthropocene period, I'm going to use England to make my points. I could use France or any of the other European countries, but I'll use England. It is an example of a society whose metaphysics and paradigms dominate the globe today. And we, as humans on this globe, we usually refer to it as Western way of thinking, Western science, Western education, and so on, okay? Now, England and the Anthropocene, when I say the Anthropocene goes much further back, all you have to do is think about the pollution of the Thames River and the big stink that they wrote about in the mid 1800s. So in other words, I don't quite believe that the Anthropocene is really just from the 1940s or so. I think it's been around for much longer than that. See, England, with whoever its indigenous people were, and they don't want to talk about it because they don't even remember who those indigenous people are, has been subjected to several takeovers. Celts, Romans, Norsemen, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and the last major takeover, I would say, were the Normans. In my view, these takeovers all have but wiped out what was indigenous to England. England became a multicultural society. In other words, nothing indigenous. It was all borrowed from from the cultures that took over. In other words, England became a generalist society, culturally speaking. But that generalist nature turned out to be its strength. That generalist nature served it well. Imperially speaking, it came to dominate the world until it started to engage in specialization. Remember the fish? See, that fish is now narrowed its spectrum and became very specialized to live in a particular environment. And you can't beat that fish in its environment. But see, there's pros and cons about that. I, as a Homo sapien, a generalist, you can throw me into the water and you can take that fish and throw him on the beach. I bet you I would last longer in the water because as a generalist, I'm a little bit more adaptable. Whereas the fish, being a specialist, wouldn't last very much out on that beach. See, but once he's in his environment, I can't beat him. See, so in other words, to other animals, hey, I can't swim as good as the fish, but I can swim a little bit. I can't run as fast as a jaguar, but I can run a little bit. I can't climb trees as good as an orangutan, but I can climb a tree. See? So you see the picture. I can do a little bit of all those things. And that's the strength that human beings and seemingly why we have been able to dominate. Say. Today, the name of the game is specialization. We use specialty, in fact, as identity. If you see and meet somebody new on the street, on a plane, etc., in a meeting, the first thing we want to know is, what's your specialty? What do you do? People say, hey, I'm a lawyer. I'm a prof. I'm an engineer. That's how we identify ourselves. See, I'm a plumber, maybe with pipe dreams. See, so, and when you look at a system that's based on specialty, it works. The system works. So long as all the specialties are in sync. See? But if they're not in sync, we run into chaos. And all you have to do, for instance, our society is have one segment of society go on strike, and it throws havoc throughout the whole system. See? So you see the picture. We want to Uh, Now, I want to just kind of come back to this notion. See, all societies at one time or another lay claim to a territory. And within that territory, a culture arises from the mutual relationship with the land, the cosmos, and everything within that territory that's been claimed. A culture consists of paradigms, metaphysics, values, and customs. The paradigms or the metaphysics are the tacit infrastructures members of the society use for their beliefs, behavior, and relationships. Now, when we look at that Western approach, that Western society, the metaphysics of that Western society are based on a stagnant world. In other words, my favorite scientist, uh, Einstein, says God does not play dice with the universe. See, in other words, this is the way God made it. It'll always be that way. All we have to do as humans is discover that creation. See, and our whole science is geared towards that trying to discover. It's as though that creation is in a box, and we're trying to penetrate that box using all our magic formulas. See. Another part of that paradigm or metaphysics is that everything is about matter. Everything is inanimate except for you and me. And yeah, and a few of those birds and other animals flying around. But yeah, we kind of look down at them. We look at things in isolation. We may start out broad, but we always come to the point. See, that's why there's always one right answer. That's why there's only one God. There's only one right way to do things, and so on. So we funnel everything down to one way of doing things. We are very future oriented. In other words, the best way to explain that is been there, done, did it. Let's move on. And all you have to do is look at how we set up our education system. Hey, we start from kindergarten and we move on up. And so that if I'm in grade 7 and I ask a grade 3 question, the teacher will tell me, hey, you should have known that in grade 3. Get with the program. The same way in the university. If I'm in the 3rd year and I ask an intro question from my 1st year, prof will tell me you should have known that in your intro course. Get with the program. Been there, done, did it. Say. all is captured, all of this paradigm and metaphysics is captured in the language, in noun-based languages like English. And of course, one of the major reference that we use is time. Time is always at the back of our minds, when in reality, there is no such thing. These metaphysics that I've just pointed out to give rise to social values such as bigger, newer, faster, higher, more, and so on. You see the picture. Those are the social values that arise out of those metaphysics. And that's why, hey, we got to have something newer. I walk into the Apple store and I show them my iPhone 10. They tell me that's obsolete. Get an iPhone 12. See, even though my iPhone 10 is still working perfectly. See, now a very, very important point. And I'm using science and quantum physics here because scientists, quantum physicists, and most scientists like to be objective, say. And Steven Weinberg, a physicist, and in fact, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, talking about objectivity, says the following. He says, it should be something that doesn't refer in any specific way to human beings. It should be something from which everything else, including anything you can say about chemistry or biology or human affairs, can be derived. It shouldn't have human beings at the beginning in the laws of nature. And yet, I don't see any way of formulating quantum mechanics without an interpretive postulate that refers to what happens when people choose to measure one thing or another. Really, what he's saying is that those metaphysics that I've just been referring to are just interpretive tools. They're just interpretive, they just serve as interpretive templates. See, in other words, your paradigms and metaphysics are your interpretive template. And the reality you see is a product of that template. It is not the reality. See, because as Steven Weinberg says, we shouldn't have any human beings. There's that objective world that's out there. But as soon as you put a human being in a picture, what we come away with is an interpretation. And that interpretation is based on those metaphysics that I've been talking about. That interpretive template becomes the foundation of our sciences and methodologies. So for instance, Blackfoot has a different interpretive template and therefore a different approach to science. and a different methodology. Western science, for instance, is all about measurement. So much so that it is, if you can't measure it, it's not scientific. You can't measure love, so it's not scientific. You can say or talk all about love and so on, but anything you say about it cannot be classified as scientific because it's not measurable. In Blackfoot, it's all about relationships. Say, if it's not about all my relations, it's not scientific. Say, big difference in what is science in the Western world and in the Blackfoot world. Say, so if we came to understand that these are just interpretive templates, and if we were able to bring the two together, you will have a much broader window to look out at that objective world, and therefore a bigger window to look through, and your science will be much broader based. You will recall we said that England or Western society began as, as a generalist society. But since, in my case, my Anthropocene, it has become more and more specialized, resulting from those linearity, binary thinking, and so on, which are the products of Western metaphysics. So that specialist paradigm, and especially the social values that come with it, has resulted in human footprints on the earth. That human footprint is a product of our metaphysics and social values that arise out of how we do things. So, from the concrete jungles to the ecological makeovers of the real jungles is what we've been doing to our globe, to our environments. And guess what? That forward-looking aspect that accompanies it, we call it progress. So that today, every major river on the earth has been dammed. Okay. The plains of North America have been totally changed ecologically due to pesticides spread all over the place. All the bugs are dying. You will recall, if some of you are old enough, when you used to drive down the highway, your windshields used to be plastered with bugs. That doesn't happen anymore. See, and what happens is that those birds, those bats that live on those bugs now have to travel further and further afield to get their food. And it's in that distance travel that they start to come into contact with human beings. Lo and behold, COVID-19. See, if they didn't have to travel that distance, we wouldn't have COVID-19. Now, as we're saying, the bugs have to travel further to get their food and in the process spread COVID viruses to humans. And all I have to do is give it to one human, and then one human can spread it all over the place, or pass it on to livestock that we come in contact with. Our freshwater fish are dying from mining pollution. Our ocean fish are dying from garbage, such as plastic, because the oceans are just garbage dumps, not unlike the Thames River and the resulting big stink. Did you know that we now have more livestock than wild animals on the globe? We have more livestock than we have wild animals. What we need to really think about is that we, Homo sapiens, live in a very narrow spectrum of ideal conditions. Say, we live in a very narrow spectrum of ideal conditions. That's why some scientists say that we came into existence as an accident, that we were an accident of nature. That accident may have been that mix of primates and so on that we originated from, as opposed to a singular primate. See? And that mix of primates and so on that we came from, I think, is what gave us that generalist notion. And that generalist notion is really what brings about our dominance. Just like England, as a generalist society, became a dominant society in the world. But through specialization, it's, shrinking and disappearing. And so we need to take a lesson from that. See, a point, just as a slight segue, is we're going through a specialization. And all I have to do is say, if I were to say to you, Recipsa locator, would any of you know what I'm talking about? Not many. But if I was in a group of lawyers, especially criminal lawyers and so on, they would all know what I'm talking about. So in other words, the need for language starts to disappear by specialization, just like the fish, the need for language starts to disappear. And all you have to do is, hey, get that phone out and the texting. The need for language is disappearing. I think the need for language has 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 reached its zenith, its point, and it's starting to come down now. And because there's less and less need for it, which all points to this notion we're becoming more specialist society. But through specialization, if there's nothing else, like a big meteor that might hit the earth, hey, we'll go the way of the others that have gone extinct. Now, so all of these bugs and plants we call weeds and are a nuisance on our constructed lawns all contribute an ecological balance that make for our existence, because we live in a very narrow gap. And if we change those conditions and factors within that narrow spectrum, we won't be around. If you don't believe that, stop breathing for a few minutes, see how long you last. See, that's one of the ideal conditions. That's why climate change is such an important issue today. See, so in other words, large-scale eco change means we will go down the Neanderthal freeway. Let me end my thoughts with you by telling you a Blackfoot or Cree story, Blackfoot and Cree story. I don't remember it in full detail because it was a long time ago that I heard it, that it was told to me. But I do remember the following about it, okay? And it goes something like this. There are 4 races in the world. The black man is the oldest. And that seems to complement the scientists that say we came out of Africa and so on. And these 4 races all have responsibilities or gifts and so on. The black man has the gift of song. That song, hey, reflects the notion of motion and vibration, etc. In other words, existence. The brown man is the second oldest. He's got the responsibility for the land. That's why our people are always talking about the land issue, okay? Everything with indigenous people here in Canada, in the States and so on, it's always about the land. The third oldest is the yellow man, the Oriental world, so on. And their gift and responsibility is about the body, health, and so on. And the white man is the youngest and is still maturing. If you can think of little kids, you know, little kids that are out there running around all over the place, getting into trouble, etc., and so on. That's still learning quite a bit, and so on. See, but see, his responsibility is bringing us all together. That's his ultimate responsibility. And maybe that's the reason why the white man is all over the globe, has not been limited to their local original territory. They're all over the place. You don't see Blackfoot all over the world. We, we, we stay in our territory. But the white man is all over the world. But being young, he is foolish, daring, does crazy things, but he will grow and mature to fulfill his responsibility. So our people say we have to be, just like with kids, we have to be patient. When kids grow up, they learn their responsibilities becoming an adult. So my message is Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, especially the youngest of you, maybe you should wear moccasins so you won't make such big imprints on the land. That is, if you want us to be around in 10,000 years. But see, the way we're going, we're not sure. It's almost like we're working to our own disappearance. So if we want to be around as Homo sapiens that seemingly dominate the world, we will have to change our ways. The dinosaurs had their day. Neanderthal seemingly had their day, but they're all gone. Are we going to be just a passing phase? Or are we going to stop and reflect and maybe relook at how we approach things? So when we're talking constructed environment, those constructed environments, where are they leading us to? Are we going down are we following the fish's fins? Are we going down the Neanderthal freeway? Or are we going to stop and reflect so that hopefully 10,000 years, 100,000 years, we'll still be around and that we're not just a passing phase? Yeah. Thank you.